All right, next topic, female psychology. So now that you have all this stuff and you have all these tools, let's get a little bit empathetic and understand the girl. Because you have all these ways to make yourself seem valuable, you have all these ways to control the situation, and if all you did was that, you'd actually do okay. Because you'd be conveying your high value guy, you'd be getting girls sparking attraction, and maybe even chasing you a little bit, and then you could do okay. But you would probably mess up in a lot of dumb ways. Because what you would do is you'd say things that will immediately turn a girl off that you're not understanding. Or you would ask girls to do things that make them a little too slutty, and then you'd get a rejection, right? Or you'd maybe try and push things a little bit too fast to make them uncomfortable, or you'd push them too slow and not assume the masculine role, right? So if you're an attractive guy, that gets you a long way, but if you're an attractive guy and you understand women as well, then you're in a much, much better place. First thing to understand about women. Contrary to social conditioning, women like sex too, okay? Women like sex too, probably more than you, at least when it's done right, all right? How do I know this? If you've ever been with a girl in bed and she's really enjoying it, how loud does she get? Louder than you. Right? How much does she like bite your fucking shoulder and like leave marks and all kinds of like shit that you almost wish she wouldn't? She get super into it, right? They start scratching and biting and becoming animals and screaming, and it's crazy. It's fucking nuts. I've never done that. I've never had an orgasm so good I had to bite somebody. like, come on, right? Yeah, so like sex is fucking good for women. They want it. They are longing for good sex. In fact, if you look at the male body was designed to survive. It was designed to go kill animals, fight other men, protect their society. Female body was designed to have kids. Let's be fair. It's smaller. They have less muscle mass. They're missing a rib. They have like their entire they bleed once a month. Like there's all these things that are like negative to their survival that are designed specifically towards having kids, right? So women are literally, they're designed for sex, right? They want sex more than you do. It's better for them. However, it is very important for them not to appear slutty, and here's why. Do you remember when we went back to evolutionary psychology, the male reproductive ideas, right? So there's two ways. There's the lover, which is basically have as many kids as possible, lots and lots of kids, right? And then there's the provider, which is to have one super kid, right? One big amazing kid that's gonna have lots of, or one or two, or a few super kids, right? So those are the two male sort of roles. The female role, what does a girl want in terms of evolution and whatnot? Again, she wants to get good genes, but she also wants a guy that'll stick around. Now, one of the biggest evolutionary dangers for a guy is if she's being this guy for a girl, or he's being this guy for a girl to a child that's not his. That's evolutionary loss, right? That's the evolutionary, like you crapped out and fucked up your bloodline kind of thing. And so it's very important for guys, if they decide to adopt this provider role, to be sure that their girl is faithful, right? Because if they're providing and raising kids that aren't their own in terms of genetics, end of the bloodline. So throughout history, there's been tons and tons of emphasis placed by men on making sure the girl that you sleep with is not a slut, making sure the girl you marry isn't a whore, right? So basically, because of that, there is culturally two categories. In evolution, they call it the Madonna-whore dichotomy. Where basically, men divide women into two categories. There's like the angelic girl that's my wife that would never do anything wrong and would never cheat and is like held up on this pedestal. And then there's whores who you fucking like don't care about, right? And this actually fits in with the lover provider frame too, because if you believe this, it makes an optimal male strategy work, which is you devote yourself to this one girl, and then any of these other like whore girls, you can go impregnate them and they don't matter because they're like almost like they're just like these bad people, like almost not like subhuman, but they're like not of that same level. So like, here's my angel that I care about and I'm a provider for, and then these other girls, I don't feel morally wrong about just like fucking them and not staying with them because they're this type of girl, right? So that's a convenient sort of like narrative, I guess, in society that exists. And that's why there's a lot of this like slut shaming type stuff that goes on. It's fitting these girls into one category or the other in order to justify certain things. Now for a girl, if she wants to get a good provider, if she's in this category, she's in bad shape, okay? Because if she's in this category, all the good providers are not gonna trust her, aren't gonna like wanna dedicate their resource because that's high risk. That's high risk. Whereas if she's perceived this way, then she's very like marriage material. Have you guys ever heard that? There's like, you know, like don't turn a hoe into a housewife, or like she's marriage material, she's not. That comes from this idea, which is like she's a loyal one. So girls are in this weird paradox where they really want sex, but they also want to be considered this for if and when it's time to get married, right? And so your job, if you want to have sex with a girl, is to solve that problem for her. If you can solve that problem of you can have sex with a high value guy without ruining your reputation, then they're very willing to do it. But if having that sex ruins their reputation, they're very unwilling to do it. Okay, so that's what you really need to solve within female psychology, all right? And this leads to a lot of really interesting scenarios. I'll give you one example. One example is we're in New York. I was actually with Tyler in the back of I was told this afterwards. Tyler's with a student in a taxi, and puts a student in the front of the car, and then he's with two girls in the back of the car because he's keeping the girls like in a good mood and whatnot, right? And he tells the student, because the student lives in New York, he doesn't. He says, okay, tell the taxi where to go, right? And the student if you just gave him an address, good to go, girls are down, whatever. And the student's confused though, he turns around and says, we're going to my place, right? And the girl's like, no, we can't go to your place. No, not your, like, whatever, right? They've already agreed to go watch a movie or whatever. Like, no, I can't go to your place. So Tyler like calms him down, makes it fun again, tells the students like, okay, it's all good. We're gonna go watch a movie, tell them where to go. And the student kind of turns around and then doesn't get it, and he turns back and he's like, wait, I'm confused. I'm telling him to go to my place though, right? And they're just like, no, we can't. So I calms it down one more time, like does this like gargantuan, incredible turnaround effort, gets the girls back on board again, and he looks at the student and he's like, okay, give him an address. And the guy goes, oh, okay, cool. Turns around, talks, like, wait, but I'm giving him the address from my apartment, right? And the girl's like, pull over, we gotta get out. And they leave. No. Okay? So what happens? The girls were down as long as they didn't have to act slutty, as long as they didn't have to, in their mind, adopt this role, right? Girl will go sleep with you as long as she doesn't have to acknowledge herself in this category, or as long as her friends won't see her in this category, and especially like guys that she's potentially interested in won't see her in this category. Okay, so that's the problem that you need to solve. Because they have, again, this very, very, very high level of male judgment and female judgment as well, right? And this comes from, the funny thing is, this comes from a tribal setting when we knew like 20 or 30 people our entire life, and our reputation followed us forever and ever. Now in a big city, it doesn't mean very much. And actually in cities like LA, New York, the bigger cities, a lot of times girls will be much more promiscuous and much more willing because, again, they're not around that small circle of friends that will judge them. This also, by the way, we'll talk about this tomorrow, it goes a lot into screening. Like if you meet a girl and she's out with her family, you have to be very, very careful because they're people she's known her whole life. She doesn't want to be this to them, right? Or if she's with like friends she's known since grade school, doesn't want to be this. If she's in Vegas with random people she barely knows and staying by herself, all of a sudden, who cares? It's Vegas, right? And it's totally fine. Okay, so it's very contextual, it's very situational as well. But the key thing is to set up a situation where being with you is a win as opposed to a loss, okay? And that's actually why disqualification works as well. Because if you're pushing a girl away and she feels she has to win you over, now she views you as a high value guy, and sleeping with a high value guy doesn't make you a whore. Sleeping with a low value guy does. Does that make sense? Like sleeping with the king, no matter what value you're at, you can sleep with the king and you're not a whore. You can still be a Madonna and like sleep with the king. But if you sleep with like the butcher than like, all of a sudden, right? Hope nobody in here is a butcher, but you know what I mean. Sorry, I watched Game of Thrones, so anyway, it's a fucking anyway, whatever. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing I find interesting because like eventually when you get into like a relationship, it's like trying to tame the whore into turning the hoe into a housewife type of mentality. So you're saying that embracing the lover and the provider in you is like trying to balance. By being the lover, you handle the whore. By being the provider, you handle the Madonna side of her. Is that?
To an extent. I would say that there's another way to go, which is to be the guy that understands and doesn't judge.
Gotcha.
Which is what I try and do actually. Because like, here's an interesting one for you. So the girl that I'm with now, she's bisexual. We do threesomes together. Arguably not, right? Yeah. But I like that she's bisexual. I like that we do threesomes together. I'm really close with her. I like her a ton as a person. And I'm very happy to have her in my life now and going forward. So I accept that she has these aspects and she knows I accept that and I'm okay with it and I won't judge her for it. And she knows that in spite of whatever I know about her in this category, I will treat her that way. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right? And in fact, the fact that she has that makes her more of that to me, personally, because of my personal characteristics. So that non-judgment is very, very key. And if you indicate that you're a judgmental guy, girls are gonna you're gonna have a hard time having them sleep with you. If you indicate no judgment and fun, then they will. In fact, that's kind of a funny one too, is if you, I don't know how, actually this is a little unrelated, but if you, for example, are taking a girl home for a one night stand and you convey something that's a little bit too good, like, for example, this happened a lot in Vegas, happens sometimes out here. Girl really likes you, she's into you, about to hop in a taxi with you, and then you tell her something about business that's really cool, or you tell her something really educated. And then at that moment, all of a sudden, she's like, oh shit, I really like this guy. And you can see it like, it pops in her eyes. And she's like, you're smart. You're like really smart. I'm like, yeah, it's cool, whatever. And she's like, you should take my number. We should go on a date.
That's what happened.
I'm like, exactly. Yep. It happens a lot. Because what happened is you just got into this situation where she wanted you this way, and now she wants you this way. So she was this, now she wants to act like this.
I feel like I'm always having to like date too, and I'm like, what's going on?
But it can be a number of different things. But one thing it can be, especially if it's on and then flips, is that you said something a little too judgmental or a little bit too much in this frame, and all of a sudden she's like, oh well, he wants this kind of girl, so she becomes the type of girl you're indicating you want. Yeah.
Pick up, because guys that want to have sex, I guess they always look at the provider role as negative, but it's not always something that should be looked at negative.
No.
If you bring up, you brought up Game of Thrones, not to go off topic, but one of the reasons I think like Egret like John is because of this sense of like, he was a good guy, but he was still a sexy guy, but she liked him. She had all these wildings that were like crazy, like that could fuck her, that were men, but then he was the one guy that she was like, you're honest, you're honored. Like I know you're not a guy that's gonna.
Remember, what does a girl want? She wants either the balance of the two, or the mix of the two that works well. So yeah, she wants the best guy she can get that will stick around. Yeah, makes sense. Okay.